We are about to do a masterclass in the Akashic Records, Psychic and Channeling Development. I'm also going to show you what a soul retrieval looks like if you want to get into these shamanic practices. So I'm going to walk you through a client session so you can also glean insights and downloads for your own personal life. We will also be talking about the importance of symbolism. Our brain processes images 60,000 times faster than words because it tells a story and a narrative, and it's more tangible for our experiences. So you're going to see a lot of this as we go through the adventure with one another. So let me tell you what she wanted to come see me for. So the next wave of financial abundance. That's something that her and I have been working on in our mentorship with one another, and it's always a different flavor every week. Of that. But here we're going to be talking about how we're weaving our spiritual gifts in with our financial abundance. And I'm going to be reading from my notes. So stay on track. When I went into her energy field, there was a giant eye that was blinking at me. And I had asked her, have you seen the Lord of the Rings? And she said, yes, like the eye of Sauron, a giant all-seeing eye on the top of this tower. And I said, not the eye of Sauron. And I said, that means knowledge and wisdom. That's what that's symbolic for. I said, let's go see what's going on over there. So we start walking towards this tower, and there's an elevator. Her and I walk into it, and while we're in the waiting area, I said, it's giving Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. If you have seen that movie before, where Charlie and Willy Wonka get into the elevator and then it zooms up in the sky and busts out of the ceiling, and then he tells him, like, hey, you won the factory. And I said, what do you think that we are going to find at the top? Because obviously that symbolism is giving something to celebrate. Good news, good tidings. And she said, I'm going to find answers. I said, okay, this is where we're going to take a pause, because it's giving very finite reasoning where we're working towards this final destination. So I paused the elevator, and she's asked, did I do something wrong? I asked, why are you thinking that? That is reminiscent of childhood trauma, where you've had to get ready for disappointment or brace for impact, whether physically or emotionally or psychologically, and that's rolling over into adulthood with manifestation, or always thinking that you're doing something wrong or it's going to go off track. The rug can be pulled out from underneath you. So I said, why are we thinking that? And because this is something that her and I had been working on previously, she intuitively took a pause and went within and said, don't assume something is negative. Don't assume something is negative. So now we're at a place of neutrality where it's like, oh no, I did something wrong. Maybe we don't assume it's negative. But now we want to go positive. But it's difficult to go from negative to positive because it's a big frequency jump. So meeting in the middle will help us get there as a bridgeway point. And she herself, which I was very proud of her, said, I'm going to assume it's something spectacular. I said, great, we love that. I said, how does it feel? And she said, exciting. And I reminded her that anxiety and excitement are very similar. Your body is processing them in the same way. It's adrenaline that's coursing through you. The difference between anxiety and excitement is your perception, what you are associating the meaning of it to. So the elevator, it could be, oh no, I did something wrong, that's why we're taking a pause. Or what about the other billion potentialities of maybe something really amazing is about to happen? This is when she looked at the buttons on the panel in the elevator and said, oh, these are my different levels of consciousness. And I said, yes, it's not about reaching a pinnacle, because that's working on linear time. That's very 3D with our goals, dreams, and aspirations. But we want to be quantum manifestors where we're collapsing timelines. That's not really what life is about this one overarching moment in time. It's about every single step along the way. There's always a new pinnacle. And then you move into the next chapter of your life and there's a new pinnacle, and it's very circular and seasons and growing and evolving. I asked, do you want to explore one of the floors? And she said, yes. I said, which one? She said, 12. Okay. And she went over and hit the button and said, ding. All of the different numbers are timeline potentialities. So we walk out of the elevator and we see plants everywhere. And she asked, where are we? And I said, it appears that we are in a jungle. I said, there's usually a jungle guardian. And I said, oh, there she is. And we looked over, and it was a leopard, the yellow kinds that have the spots. Now in shamanism, leopards, panthers, and jaguars are considered the same animal in different perspectives. And the reason I said that, there's a woman named Stephanie Kojak. You can find her on Tube, and she has a jaguar meditation that's really beneficial. So even with the leopard coming up, we can listen to one about jaguars. So leopards, as spirit animals, represent hearing things 2 times better than people. Like, that's an actual fact on the 3D plane. But they hear things 2 times better than humans, which is symbolic of awareness and helping you find what you may have missed. Her and I started to walk behind the leopard where she was taking us, and we originally had boss babe business suits on. And the reasoning for that is she used to work in corporate, my client, and now she's getting, more into energy healing. So the clothes that we changed into were very natural, like cloth and made of leaves and vines, and that was reminiscent of weaving more shamanic practices into her life and her business. So the leopard brought us to a beautiful waterfall in the jungle, and waterfalls are representative of self-reflection. I said, hey, how about we go look into the water to see what we can find? And she started to kind of peer into it a little bit, could kind of see her face, and she was wearing a headdress that was made of construction paper. It was very cute, almost like a little kid would make. But there was some resistance to her moving closer to the perception that she was trying to see. She looked at me and said, it's like I can't reach the image. It's almost like there was an invisible barrier that she was not able to access those insights that were right in front of her. Then I saw an image of a well that you would pull water out from, made out of stone. It's giving fairy tale. This is symbolic of going deeper within somebody's Akashic records, in their psyche, in their subconscious. So her and I are both now in the well, and it's complete pitch black dark. And she asked, where are we? And I said, we're probably viewing a memory or a different timeline, a past incarnation. Or it could have been something with inner children too, that's of the past. But per what I was picking up on was this is a different timeline. So we're looking around. I said, oh, there you are. And I saw a different woman with the exact same headdress that she had seen in the waterfall. And I said, it looks like she is consulting the chief of this village. And there was a lot of people that were walking around, but obviously she was a very important energy healer, a shaman in this time period. Have you ever seen Doctor Strange before, where he astral projects outside of himself? And there's 2 versions. That's what was happening here. This woman was talking to the chief, and then she noticed me and my client standing across this field and looked at us and said, meet me in my tent. So at first we were viewing a memory, but now we're experiencing it in real time. So her and I are sitting in this tent talking to the shaman, and she asked, why are you here? To my client. And she said, I already know why you're here. It was a rhetorical question. And my client, she asked her to hold out her hands, and she put a blue beetle within it. And my client said, what do you want me to do with this? And the shaman said, I want you to eat it. My client was like, what? And mainly because, she didn't want to eat a bug, but also because she felt bad, like, for eating this creature. And again, the shaman was kidding. The beetle started crawling out of her hands and up her body and went and sat as a hair clip, because this is close to her crown chakra and the other transpersonal chakras like the causal, soul star chakra, stellar gateway. The shaman said he is a transmitter, a walker between worlds. He will help you re-remember your memories. And this is when I was asking the shaman, hey, will you be able to teach her? Give her tutelage. And she said, I have much to do. What she meant by that was she was the mom of a very large territory of people, of villagers. So she had a lot on her plate. And so she was using but connecting her with her familiar that encapsulated all of her memories of this timeline to transmit that to my client. I asked her, what is your name, to the shaman. She said, well, this is not my birth name, but it's a name that will be in most resonance with my client. And she said, Savasana. I said, oh, that's interesting. That's a yoga pose. And it means corpse pose. And I was like, oh, that's a little creepy. I was like, well, why did you pick that name? And Savasana represents surrender, becoming one with the all. So kind of detaching from just your one identity in this incarnation and understanding that you have access to all of these different timelines and modalities and memories from across time and space. Death and rebirth. So letting go of old structural systems and becoming more of yourself through this experience. Sacred stillness, learning from a mentor, and eternal awareness that we have access to these things within our Akashic records. Now, what I thought was very interesting, but obviously in alignment, she had a session with someone else the previous night before where they were working on witch wounds. And she has also recently signed up for a Celtic Reiki and Akashic Records mentorship. I said, okay, well, these are why all of these things are coming up now. Her higher self said, we are on the path to working with more of our naturalistic abilities. This is when I was asking her a lot of questions about her beliefs and values about incorporating shamanic practices into her business. Because right now she's helping a lot of corporate girlies finding their purpose and learning energetic boundaries and manifesting and things of that nature. But enfolding these concepts that we have talked about is getting a little more woo-woo and mysticism. So how do we feel about that? And I was telling her a story of a couple years ago, my guides came to me and said, hey, you're going to be a shaman. And I was like, what? I felt a little, not insecure, but a little anxiety around calling myself that because I haven't gone to study in Peru and I didn't really have any plans to do that. And they said, oh, don't worry about that. What I didn't realize at that time was the level of Akashic work and quantum healing that I was going to be able to get to, where I opened up the pathways to different timeline versions of myself, past lives that were shamans that ended up teaching me and becoming mentors of mine. And I learned everything that I needed to, and that's how I'm able to do the things that I am now. But I wasn't comfortable calling myself that in the beginning because I hadn't gone to formal school for it. So those are a lot of layeral things that I worked on within myself to feel confident now in expressing that, because I am very talented in those areas, but it's not something that I learned necessarily on the 3D plane. It was from my cosmic mentors and then implementing and practicing them over these years. And what I explained to her, you don't necessarily have to call yourself that in your sales and your marketing or even say it out loud. At the chapter that we're in right now, maybe you never call yourself a shaman. Okay, there's a million other things. I've called myself a cosmic psychologist before. It is more about giving yourself permission of, oh, this is me as a soul. I have the capabilities to open up these different timelines and that be my path of learning. And then when we did a little bit more discovery work where she was telling me about soul retrievals that she's been doing, I'm like, girl, you're already in it. If you're able to do soul retrievals, that is shamanic practices. It's very expansatory work. And then to circle it back around to where we first began with the next wave of financial abundance, this was the key of, hey, we are going to be connecting with a whole new community and an audience. So we're getting energetically prepared to receive them. And it's going to shift the way that you're making content and the way that you're presenting yourself. We even talked about all the plants that she's adding into her house. And she didn't feel comfortable enough to do that in her corporate job, but now that she's running her own business, she's filling up her house. And I was like, yeah, that's reminiscent of the jungle that we were in your shamanic heritages. But a point that I had brought up is when you start opening yourself up to these past life memories, these different incarnations, sometimes that can override the system structures that we have here. Obviously, Savasana was doing a lot of trading services for resources. And one of the resources that we have here in this incarnation is money. So when you are seeing these snapshots in these different timelines, you've got to hold this within yourself of money is what I am exchanging in this one. Okay, I am doing it differently. And I can also be very financially wealthy with being a shaman or incorporating shamanic practices. We're going into this new age where that is going to be a highly sought after skill. And that goes back to the session that she had the night before with witch wounds. Because now that we have social media, visibility can be a form of wealth. Obviously, you have more eyes on you, but then that can juxtapose to the witch wounds if we're trying to hide our magic. And so this is the time to really step boldly with all of this to do a lot of ancestral karmic healing within ourselves. I would love to hear in the comments if this gave you a new perspective on the Akashic Records, soul retrievals, why symbolism is so important. We saw that throughout the entirety of this adventure with one another, and different ways to channel and utilize our psychic abilities. If you would like your own personal session, I do offer those, or if you would like me to teach you how to do this level of Akashic work, I do have sessions and mentorships available as well in my bio or in the comments, and I'm wishing you an absolutely magical day.